Welcome back to another edition of Scotch and a Beer with me. It's Christmas Eve here in the Czech Republic, which means it's the 23rd in the United States. Since I'm out here in the countryside, I'm getting a bunch of these done, and hopefully I'll get caught up to Formula Drift, Florida by the time I'm back in the States. So, Merry Christmas everybody from Officer Day. Fresh off of getting to Formula D Atlanta, starting with a dead battery, a car that won't turn, and spinning out my first lap in practice ever. So you could say I was off to a wonderful start. In this episode, I'll go over what it was like to go through the qualification process, the mental breakdown that I almost had, and we finally figure out what was causing the steering bind in the front end of the car. So that'll be a little bit later on in the video. And if you want to watch the Sunshine and Roses version of all of this, check out Jay Wood's video of the Whiskey Garage Chronicles on my YouTube channel. I'll put it in a link here. But first, Scotch and a Beer. So, last time I got the Tomintoul 10-year, again thanks to Michaela's mom for that for my birthday. And this time we're going to go with the Tomintoul 16-year. And for the beer, we're going with the Staropramen, how do you say that? Szymczewski Weiber.
Oh, Smichowski Výběr.
Smichowski Výběr. And it's not a V beer, it's a word. Výběr. What does it mean?
It's like exclusive,
Exclusive. Whatever. It's another wheat beer, non-filtered. So we're going to give that a try. Trying to give it some proper European head, which is ridiculous. I like that. It's like a very light-hearted lager, but unfiltered with wheat beer elements. I think this is my favorite one so far. And the Tomintoul Speyside Glenlivet 16-year. That's nice. Ooh, sweet cherries, hardwoods, lumber mill, lots and lots of different fruits in this one. So let's give the 16-year a try. Ultra smooth, much sweeter than the last one. None of the kind of soily, earthy dirt taste that the 10-year had. Amazingly smooth. Like, that may be the smoothest Scotch that I've ever had. Like, no bite at all. Pretty impressed. And that's all I'm going to say about that, because I have a crap load to go over with the rest of the story, and I need to finish the rest of Atlanta in this video, and I don't want it to go over 30 minutes. So, let's get started. So we get up bright and early Friday morning, and we head to the Vado Zone that we ordered the Quest alternator for. We pick that up, we head to the track, and Andy and Aoki start tossing that in. Now, here's where everything gets a little bit different. Friday is open to the public. There's very limited practice, and that kind of changes everything, because Wednesday and Thursday you're setting up, and you have closed practice. There's no spectators, there's no stress, there's no crowds, there's no anything. So now everything that you do to try to get in and out of the track, to try to just walk down the pits and back, there's people now, and there's people everywhere, and so everything takes more time. So we are rushing to get this alternator in. It's fighting us a little bit. Luckily, Andy is a fab god and gets that thing in, and it's also dry for once. This is the first time it hasn't rained since we got there, so that was kind of a godsend to get that thing in and dialed in. Meanwhile, people are swinging by and saying hello, and it's kind of dragging the process out a little bit. Now, you got to keep in mind that we have 2 days of shit show plus all the traveling behind us, so we're kind of jaded at this point already, and all of the guys coming into the event are coming in with a fresh slate, so they expect you to be at your best, and so that's what you have to do. You got to put on a smile and pretend like everything's hunky-dory. So I entertained folks, tried to sling some shirts while Aoki and Andy worked their magic on the car, and Jay Wood was kind of filming the process and then was immediately out for practice. We also had the car up in the air and the wheels off to try to find one last iota of thing that we could with the suspension. We changed a few more things out, but again, everything looks fine when the car is up and in the air, and like I said, I'll get into that in just a few. Now that brings me right back to the people. Having been to Formula Drift Atlanta with Danny George as a spotter, I realized how amazing the fans are at that particular venue. They're the most fun to be around, genuine, kind, funny, and helpful people that I think I experienced at any of the stops during Formula D. Some of which I am still friends with to this day, one of which became a roommate of mine, which I'll get into here in a second. They make you feel good about anything, even if your car is a shit show and you obviously can't drive. And they brought a much needed, honest to God smile to my face every time a new group of people would come up and say hello. Thank you guys. You made that event tolerable. Now, one group of friends that were kind of standoutish in that regards were somebody that I'd met the previous year, being Danny George's spotter, and that was Blinky, aka Kevin White, and his crew of people. They were big fans of Danny's and now of mine, and so the conglomeration of our pit areas and everything with them hanging out was just awesome. They were just hanging out, drinking. Kevin was helping me sling t-shirts. I believe we got somebody into one of my thongs. I can't remember if that was there or if that was in Seattle. I think that was in Seattle. Nevertheless, they were there to raise the spirits of everybody and just made it an awesome time all around. Now, fun fact, one of Kevin's dudes pulled the fire alarm in the hotel we were staying at that night, which at 3 o'clock in the morning wasn't super fun, but looking back on it, it was pretty damn funny. Thank you guys for making a shitty rookie with a broken car feel good about himself and still have a good time. Much appreciated. Now, the Harbor Freight tools that I had purchased and the generator had put in work, and I'm super glad that they did because we got the car on the ground and running at 14 volts like it should be, charging the actual battery right before practice was about to start. So we load up the hot pit truck, I toss on my driver's suit, throw my helmet in the car, and we head out on the long, winding forest road with lots of speed bumps out to the actual racetrack itself. Road Atlanta is freaking huge. Now, since my 3 laps yesterday were in the rain, these would be my honest to God first laps in the dry at Road Atlanta. I was kind of pumped, I was kind of worried, but I knew that driving in the dry would be better because there was less chance of the steering causing a small mistake to spin me out that easy. Perfect. I was stoked to be in the dry. Now I'm sitting here next up to go on the hot skid pad basically to warm the tires up. And I'm sitting in the car, strapped in, Hans device is on, I'm ready to rock and roll. And the start line is back the other direction towards the downhill, and the hot pit burnout area is like way in the back. And during the driver's meeting, they were super adamant about us not going into the grass and or crashing or hitting the wall or dropping a tire or anything back there. They didn't want us anywhere off the track. Super, 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 super adamant about it. And so I'm just sitting here kind of not paying attention, probably trying to take a nap because I was tired as hell. And Tony Angelo's out there and he's doing these like crazy fast flicks into J turns and accelerating back and doing it back and forth. And somehow he loses it and stuffs the front end of the car in a wall over the grass. And I'm just sitting here like, oh my God, he just wrecked. And that's exactly what they told us not to do. Like crashed hard enough to make the car non-movable. Now, I love Tony, and I'm sure that really, really sucked at the time, but it was actually pretty funny to watch because everybody else was already in line for practice, so I think it was only me and a few other people that actually saw it. His crew got over there the fastest that I've ever seen, got him pulled out, and then pulled back to the pits post-haste, so good on you for that one, crew. And side note, if you didn't know, Tony is one of the OGs of drifting. Not only was he a driver in Formula D, but he was a judge, and now he has moved on to greener pastures and actually making money through cars and hosts his show on Motor Trend TV. He also actively participated in, judged, ran, coached at countless grassroots events on the East Coast and probably a bunch on the West Coast. I know I met him at a couple in Colorado. All around good dude. Love you, Tony. Sorry that happened. Back to the story. So I do my donuts without hitting the wall somehow, contrary to the car wanting to do so every time I try to flick in. So, needless to say, the steering issue is still there, but the car is staying on. So this is a bonus in my book. So I line up for my first practice run in the dry, I choose the following side, I give the guy a few beats, and blast down the hill. Even though the car is only making around 550 horsepower, it feels super, super fast, it's grippy. I'm just worried about the steering. So I chuck it in and brush the inner clip, and on transition, the car just straightens and I cannot counter steer anymore, and I end up just kind of driving up and all the way around back. Hey, at least I didn't spin out this time. Now, I get back in line. I think there were 58 drivers at this particular round of FD that had running cars, and being at the back of a line of 58 people, even when you're sending two at a time where people have to go on the track and then come back all the way around and go back up, it takes a long time. If somebody goes into the kitty litter, that's 30 minutes right there. So, of course, somebody does go into the kitty litter, which delays things. Needless to say, out of 2 hours of practice on 2 separate rounds, I got 1 lap per practice, which is nothing. Now, I will say, even though I didn't do much drifting on the track, the car looked really good. So there's that. I get up the line for my second run in practice, and same thing. I enter in super shallow, I'm coming up the hill, super shallow, straightening a bunch of times, going around the keyhole, and I can't get it to go past, like, literally right here on the steering wheel. Like it locks, and then if I do get it past that, it locks going back the other way. So I am in this very, very small area that I can steer from about here to about here and there to there. And it's not working out good for me. So my second run is basically an autocross all the way around. I would say 90% of the pictures that were taken of my car at Formula D Atlanta in 2014 were of me driving straight, which is to be expected when you don't drift or length course. So that kind of sucks. Talk about frustrating. So we pack up and we head back to the pits. Now it's only like 2.5 hours from when practice ends until qualifying begins. And in that time period, there's like a 45-minute driver's meeting, and then there's the autograph session for another 45 minutes, plus the walks back and forth to each one of those. Not one of the cool kids, and I didn't have a golf cart. So it took me a little bit longer, plus we were at the very back of the pits, which didn't help much. So that eats up that entire time period. There's no time for me to be looking. I know Andy had the front wheels up again. He was looking, he was trying to adjust things. It's just, nothing we were doing was helping at all. Plus, at the very end of the autograph session, it starts to trickle. And Atlanta, if it starts to trickle, it's going to be pouring within the next hour, hour and a half. So I knew the rain was coming. Now, normally I would pray for rain. Like, I was at a huge horsepower disadvantage coming in with like 550. And like I said, normally that would be a huge advantage for me. It would be the great equalizer. But now it was like dancing on a razor blade. Like one small, tiny mistake with only being able to steer this much, and I would spin out and everything would be over with. Like, it was just, I was dreading the rain. Now, qualification started towards the evening, and Jay Wood was, of course, there to capture these epic moments whilst waiting in line to do my first qualification lap at Atlanta. Thanks, Jay Wood, for at least making me look cool, question mark. If you didn't know, Jay Wood slays, just saying. It's about at this point where I kind of start to lose it a little bit. I'm not the best driver on the planet, but I'm decent enough to get second place at Top Drift. I have had 6 years or so of drifting experience at this point, hundreds and hundreds of events, probably thousands and thousands of tires gone through. Like, I'm not a bad driver. And on the flip side to that, I've never built a competitive car for myself. The car that I was in Pro-Am was built by Brian DeWitt of Car Crafters, maintained by Brian DeWitt of Car Crafters, and I never touched it because he wouldn't let me. And that was probably the saving grace and the reason why it did so well at Pro-Am in the first place. So this was the first competition car I'd ever built. all my other 240s before this were kind of fun party cars. They were never set up for grip. They were never set up for anything. And it was just like, well, maybe that's what it is. Maybe it was the build that was wrong. Maybe I just sucked that bad at putting a car together like Legos. Even a 240. All these things are going through my head and I'm just beating myself up over it. It's like, this is just embarrassing. That's the bottom line here. It's already really difficult for a rookie in Formula D to kind of feel accepted and to fit in unless you're already super, super high profile and then people just want to ride your coattails, which is totally not what was happening with me. I'm a dude that's a rookie, that's a funny guy, that's fun to be around, but I can't complete a lap. I can't really explain in words how that makes you feel as a driver. It was just the most embarrassed I've ever been. Like normally you're in a cool ass drift car that looks good and you want to show off. Like that's what drifting is showing off. And when you can't do that, it just makes you feel like absolute dog shit. It's also really hard to get that out of your head. Like, I know my car sucks. I have to go do this stuff anyway. I paid a lot of money to be here. And if I don't do this, even with a shitty car, it's going to feel like it was a complete waste. So you force yourself to go out and suck. And I've seen this happen to many other different drivers as we're going through. So it's not just me that this happens to. It happens to a lot of guys that bite off way more than they can chew. It's now absolutely pouring rain and I am 100% dreading going out. I don't want to go qualify. I know what's going to happen. And I'd rather just save myself the heartache and embarrassment of going out on the track, having all of the fans watching now, having J-Rod make fun of me on the PA. Like, all of this stuff is going through my head and I'm like, there's no way I can make this happen. Like, no matter what I do right now, this car sucks. So I'm just sitting here in the line waiting to go. And of course, I'm up pretty close to the front because I'm almost dead last in points and I'm just getting soaked. That's all I'm doing at this point, is just getting soaked and getting ready to be embarrassed. Now, because it was dry during practice and wet during qualification, they let each driver have one lap to go out. So I blast down the hill and 360 entry into my practice lap and fumble around doing stupid stuff all the way back to the start, turn right back around, and it's time to go for my qualification lap. So I'm sitting here at the line and I'm like, I think I can make this work. I have to shallow angle everywhere around the track and I can't get even close to hitting that lock where it stops right here. Like I'm telling the guys at the start line, like, be ready to pull me out of the kitty litter because my car doesn't turn more than this. And they're like, holy shit. I'm like, yeah, holy shit. So I suck it up, blast down, super, super shallow angle, like just holding e-brake and just barely turning the car, letting it slip, slip, slip. I brush across the first inner clip, don't let go of the steering wheel, transition back through, the slowest transition ever, but because it's in the rain, that's whatever. And I start to go up the hill and I'm like, yes, I think I can do this, I think I can do this, I think I can do this, spin. Right, going up the very beginning of the hill. It's just like, fudge packer. So I head back up the hill, broken and dejected, like I just want to drive straight back to the pits, not talk to anybody, and just cut my losses where they were and cry, I guess, is what I should have done, or quit, or anything else in regards to that. I drove back to kind of where the burnout area was, I parked, I let my frustrations out, I think I yelled, and then I drove back over to our hot pit area. Man, I don't think I've ever been that upset. I don't know what to do. It's like so much time, so much effort, so much of other people's effort, so much money wasted. 2 rounds of Formula D is like 20 grand. Like it's around 10 grand a round to run the FD, and I had just thrown $20,000 out the fucking window. And to top that all off, I'm just embarrassed. It looks like I cannot drive a car, period. So I drive back over to the hot pits and Aoki's like, dude, what the fuck? And I'm like almost in tears at this point, like I'm shaking and I'm just grabbing the steering wheel and gritting my teeth, and it's just like, dude, I can't do this. And I had an honest to God breakdown right then and there. like tears. Like, this sucks. I don't want to go again. Aoki basically had to talk me off the ledge from just hanging it all up right then and there. And I sucked it back up and went back out for my second qualification run. And same thing, I made it a little bit further. I made it up to the top of the keyhole, and this is when you drove all the way to the top of the keyhole and back down. And I made it up to the top of the keyhole, and as I go to give it some throttle, I can't steer back the other way again because I had passed the locking point, and I spun out to the left, up the hill, like up underneath the bridge. And I may be the only person in Formula D history to spin out the wrong way up at the top of the hill. So at least there's that. So I drive straight back in. I don't even stop at the hot pits. I go back to the pits. I immediately get out of the car, slam the fucking door. I'm upset and angry, and I see Dan from Powered by Max driving by in a go-kart. And I'm like, yo, Dan, real quick, can you come look at something? Come take a look at my car. Tell me what the fuck I'm missing. We are struggling, dude. There's something seriously wrong with this. Matt Field came and looked at it. He can't see what's wrong. Please, please, please help me. I paid full retail for this stuff. Help me out. So we jack the car up. We take a wheel off. He wiggles it, and within 2 seconds, he knows exactly what the problem is. And I'm like, please enlighten me. He said they had a batch of LCAs where the grub screw that holds something in was too tight, and it actually crushes the spherical bearing inside and flattens it so it feels exactly like it was. And he showed me what was happening, and I was just like, fucking, are you serious? That's it? And he was like, yeah, jack it up a little bit more underneath the knuckle and I'll show you, because when the car's unweighted, you can't see that happening. Put it under some weight, and they're sure as shit, once we jacked the actual knuckle up and put it under full weight, you could feel it. It was just like crack, crack. We also found out reason number 2 for me not being able to turn my S13. Back when the chassis was being built, apparently the bolts that hold the LCA into the subframe got lost, and Luigi had drilled out and replaced with longer SAE bolts. They were like, I don't know, 12 millimeters longer. So I had the offset rack spacers in there. So what was happening is when we would jack up the car, the offset rack spacers would point down, the suspension would move freely. It wasn't even looking like it'd come close to hitting. When you put full weight back on the car, those angled back up, and or when you were at full lock, they would change different angles based on how sloppy my rack was, and they would actually contact one side or the other. So sometimes when they'd be unweighted, it'd go below, go around, and then it couldn't come back. It would hit like this on that long SAE bolt that was the replacement. And we couldn't see that because every time we jacked the car up, it worked just fine. And same with the bushing. We would have never found that unless we had the car on the weight. And then it was a combination of both of those things. And I was just like, oh my fucking God. All of the heartache, almost wrecking the car every single time I went out on track, 20,000 US dollars in funds of mine out the fucking window because of a shitty Heim and a bolt that was too long. I don't even have words. Dan was like, I'll send you another set of bearings. Sorry, dude, that sucks. And walked off, got into his golf cart, and drove away. And I'm like, well, shit, I guess I'm going to be on the hunt for some stock lower extended S14 control arms. Fuck you very much. And that was it. I was heartbroken and really pissed that those two tiny, 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 tiny little things cost me so much time, effort, money, and grief to be met with, hey, sorry, dude, that sucks. Looking for a little bit more than that, considering I'd paid full retail for these parts from them and gotten shit in exchange. But on a side note, at least we knew what to fix going forward. Now I spent the rest of the weekend of Formula D, my second event ever, not qualifying at all, to say the least. Hanging out with sponsors, hung out with Paul from Hankook, hung out with Yukio from Turbo Bike Garrett, met up with Radium Engineering, and Officer Dan busted out Officer Dan and did some product plugs for those guys.
The sheet is set up, and he's professional, so that's good news. I also have this thing. This thing comes in here, swirls around, gets all the air bubbles out. You know what I'm talking about. It's a good thing. It's perfect. I have this here in my car right now. This thing is a fuel pressure regulator, just released, brand new. I'm telling you, this is the one to get. I also have this Bad Mama Jamma. It's a big one, because bigger is better, right? I mean, we are going to Texas in a little bit. It looks like a spaceship. You ain't never seen nothing like this. There's all sorts of pumps. You ain't never gonna run out of fuel with this thing, I promise. That's beautiful. Zoom in on these arrows right here, so you don't hook it up wrong. We're gonna move on. And we also got this. This is installed on my vehicle right now. Just like that, catch can, done. Radium Engineering, check them out. radiumauto.com, says it right there. You're gonna love it, I promise. Officer Dan out.
Schmoozed with the fans, schmoozed with anybody that I could schmooze with, drank a lot of alcohol, watched Blinky almost get arrested for pissing in a trash can right next to a porta potty because they were full and he was full of alcohol, and just generally hanging out with the people and fans of Formula D Atlanta, and it ended up really kind of mending my broken heart. And to top it all off, and the literal icing on the cake, was my crew went and had a cake made in my colors that said suck 20% less. So Andy and Aoki, that was one of the best things that you could have ever done, because that made light of the situation that had sucked so bad for me, and that just kind of brought everything full circle, put me in a much better mood. So thank you guys for that. That was fucking excellent. And that's an old Grip Royal saying, by the way. Suck 20% less. They used to send those out on the little stickers, so sick. So in the end, it was the fans, it was Blinky and his crew, it was the entire atmosphere of Formula D Atlanta that kind of turned everything around for me. It was my own crew, it was everything to do with not driving that made Atlanta such a magical time for me. Like, I had such a good time just hanging out and talking to people in the pits that I kind of forgot how bad the weekend had sucked in general. And that is where I'm going to end this video. Stay tuned for the next episode where we drive to Florida, drop the car off, fly back to Albuquerque, and I get hit with a $2,800 bill for basically an oil change, and that cost me so much money I had to forego going to Formula D Jersey. I said it was because the car broke, but it was really because I was actually broke. So I'll get into the details of that. Plus, I turned into the biggest dick on the planet and do not really enjoy myself for this next episode, so I'm kind of dreading doing it. But that's what I did, so that's going to be in a Scotch and a beer. Thank you guys so much for watching. Merry Christmas, and if I don't see you before then, which I absolutely should, have a Happy New Year. Officer Dan out.